Commander Nari Kim stood at attention in the grand chamber of the Galactic Defense Council. The room was huge and circular with walls that seemed to stretch up forever. Strange lights floated in the air, casting blue and purple shadows on everything. She had been in many important rooms before, but nothing like this. Around the curved table sat beings from across the galaxy. Their forms were different from anything she had grown up seeing. Some had 4 eyes that blinked one at a time. Others had skin that changed colors like oil on water. A few looked almost like trees with branches for arms. But all of them had one thing in common. They were looking at her with doubt. Nari kept her back straight and her hands at her sides. Her human military uniform felt plain compared to the flowing robes and crystal armor worn by the others. The medals on her chest caught the strange light. Each one represented battles fought and lives saved, but she wondered if any of these beings understood what those small pieces of metal really meant. To her right stood Captain Dongwoo Park. He was her second in command and one of the few humans in the room. His jaw was tight, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. He did not like being here any more than she did. Behind him, Lieutenant So-Young Lee held a data pad with steady hands, but Nari noticed the slight tremor in her fingers. Ambassador Thel Nome of the Vorthak rose from his seat. He was tall and thin with gray skin that looked like stone. His 4 black eyes focused on Nari, one pair at a time. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. "Honored council members, we gather today to discuss a concerning appointment." His words echoed in the chamber. "The humans wish to place one of their own in command of our integrated defense fleet. This troubles me greatly." Murmurs filled the room. Nari heard whispers in languages she did not understand, but the tone was clear. They were not happy. Thel Nome continued. "Humans are young. They have been part of our galactic community for less than 50 years. They are emotional creatures who act before they think. They take risks that endanger everyone around them." Nari felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her expression calm. She had heard these words before. Ever since humans had joined the galactic community, there were those who saw them as dangerous children playing with weapons too powerful for them to handle. The incident at Kepler Station proves my point. Thel Nome's 4 eyes all turned to stare directly at Nari. "Commander, Kim made a choice that cost 40,000 lives. 40,000 soldiers died because of her decision." The chamber fell silent. Nari could feel the weight of those words settling on everyone present. She had known this moment would come. For 3 months since Kepler Station, she had lived with the memory of that day. 40,000 names on casualty reports. 40,000 families who would never see their loved ones again. 40,000 graves that existed because she had given the order. High Curator Vel Sarn of the Zephyrians spoke next. Her voice was like music, but there was ice in it. She was beautiful in the way that cut glass was beautiful, sharp and dangerous. "Commander Kim, your tactical records show skill. This cannot be denied. But commanding integrated forces requires more than skill. It requires wisdom. It requires patience. These are qualities that develop over many years." Nari wanted to laugh, but she held it back. Patience. They wanted to talk about patience while the Devourer fleets grew stronger every day, while colonies on the Outer Rim sent desperate messages for help, while good people died because the Council spent months debating every decision. Another voice joined the discussion. Council member Darshell of the Aquatic Worlds floated in a tank of blue liquid. His translated words came through speakers around the room. "The humans fight with passion. This can be useful, but passion without control leads to disaster. How many more Kepler stations will we see if we give them command of our fleets?" Nari had heard enough. She stepped forward slightly. It was a small movement, but in the formal setting of the council chamber, it felt like shouting. Every eye in the room turned to her. "May I speak, honored council members?" There was a pause. Then the council leader, a being so old that no one remembered what species he had originally been, nodded slowly. "You may speak, Commander Kim." Nari looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as she could. Some looked away. Others stared back with cold judgment. She took a breath and began. 3 months ago at Kepler Station, I faced a choice. The Devourer fleet had broken through our outer defenses. They were 12 hours away from 3 worlds. 3 billion people lived on those worlds. Humans, yes, but also Vorthak and Zephyrians, and dozens of other species. Her voice was steady, but she could feel her heart beating faster. My fleet could not stop them in open battle. We were outnumbered 5-1. But there was another way. Kepler Station had old mining charges left, over from when it was built. Enough explosive power to create a barrier in the hyperspace lane. The chamber remained silent, but she could see that some of the council members were listening more carefully now. Someone had to stay behind to set off those charges. Someone had to delay the Devourers long enough for the evacuation ships to escape. 40,000 volunteers stayed. They knew what it meant. They knew they would not be coming home. Nari paused. She could see the faces of those soldiers in her mind. Young and old, human and alien, all of them ready to die for people they had never met. Those 40,000 died so that 3 billion could live. That is not recklessness. That is not emotional thinking. That is mathematics. 40,000 for 3 billion. Any commander worth their rank makes that choice. Ambassador Thelnome shifted in his seat. But perhaps a more experienced commander would have found another way. Perhaps those lives did not need to be lost. Nari turned to face him directly. Perhaps. But I had 30 minutes to decide and 40,000 people willing to make the sacrifice. I was not going to waste their courage on maybe and perhaps. She looked back at the full council. You say humans are too young, too emotional, too reckless. Maybe you are right, but when the Devourers came for Kepler Station, it was human recklessness that saved 3 billion lives. It was human emotion that made 40,000 people volunteer to die for strangers. It was human youth that gave us the courage to do what needed to be done. The chamber was completely quiet now. Nari could hear the soft hum of the air recyclers and the distant sound of ships moving outside. I am here because results matter more than age, more than species, more than the comfort of doing things the way they have always been done. The Outer Rim colonies are under attack. Every day we wait, more people die. You can give me command of this fleet or you can find someone else. But do not waste time questioning whether humans belong here. We proved that at Kepler Station. She stepped back to her original position and waited. The council members looked at each other. Some whispered in their strange languages. Others simply stared at her with expressions she could not read. Finally, the council leader spoke. His voice was so old it sounded like dust. The appointment stands. Commander Kim will lead the Integrated Defense Fleet. This session is closed. As the council members began to leave, Nari felt a mix of relief and dread. She had won the argument, but now she had to prove that her words were more than just talk. 40,000 ghosts would be watching everything she did from now on. Captain, Dongwoo Park moved to stand beside her. Think they will actually follow your orders, Commander? Nari watched the last of the alien council members file out of the chamber. I guess we will find out, Captain. I guess we will find out. 2 weeks had passed since the council meeting, and Commander Nari Kim stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resilience. Through the massive viewing window, she could see her fleet spread out in formation. 200 ships from a dozen different worlds all flying under one banner. It should have been beautiful, but all she could see were the divisions. The Vorthak ships flew in perfect geometric patterns. Their gray hulls gleamed like polished stone, and they maintained exact distances from each other. The Zephyrian vessels moved like dancers, weaving between the other ships with grace that made them look almost alive. The human ships looked rough and practical compared to the others, but they held their positions with stubborn determination. Each group kept to itself. Even in the vast emptiness of space, the different species found ways to stay separate. Sub-Commander Kethral approached from the tactical station. He was Vorthak like Ambassador Thelnome, but younger. His 4 eyes moved independently as he scanned the bridge displays. Commander, your fleet exercise results are ready for review. Nari took the datapad from him. The numbers were good. Better than good, actually. Her unconventional tactics had achieved victory in record time. She had used rapid repositioning and aggressive flanking moves that caught the simulated enemy completely off guard, but she could see the disapproval in Kethral's stance. You have concerns, Sub-Commander. The maneuvers were effective. His voice was careful and measured. But they required unnecessary risks. Vorthak doctrine emphasizes calculated approaches that minimize casualties. Nari nodded. She had expected this. And if the enemy does not give us time for calculated approaches, then we adapt our calculations. Before Nari could respond, her comm unit chimed. It was Chief Engineer Hyunwoo Choi calling from the engine room. His voice came through with static and the sound of working machinery in the background. Commander, we have a problem down here, not with the engines, but with the crews. Nari exchanged glances with Captain Dongwoo Park, who had been listening nearby. What kind of problem, Chief? The alien engineering teams are refusing to work with our procedures. They say our methods are too dangerous. The Zephyrians want to recalibrate every system 3 times before making any changes. The Vorthak teams keep submitting reports about safety violations that do not actually exist. Nari closed her eyes for a moment. She had hoped the lower ranks would adjust faster than their commanders, but apparently the distrust ran deeper than, she thought. I will be down shortly, Chief. Try to keep everyone focused on their jobs until then. She ended the call and looked at the bridge crew around her. Humans and aliens working at the same stations but not really working together. Lieutenant So-Young Lee sat at the communications console next to a Zephyrian officer named Telmars. They performed their duties efficiently, but Nari noticed they never spoke to each other unless required by protocol. Wing Leader Fendal materialized on the bridge in the way that Zephyrians did when they moved quickly. One moment the space was empty and the next she was there. Her crystalline features reflected the bridge lights as she spoke. Commander Kim, I must lodge a formal complaint about the fleet exercise. Nari turned to face her. What is the nature of your complaint, Wing Leader? Your tactical approach disregarded established coordination protocols. My ships were forced to break formation to accommodate human attack patterns. This created unnecessary exposure to enemy fire. But we won the exercise. Victory achieved. Through reckless methods is not true victory. It is merely delayed disaster. Nari felt the familiar frustration building in her chest. These beings had centuries of military tradition, but they were so focused on doing things the right way that they forgot why they were fighting in the first place. She was about to respond when another voice interrupted. Commander Kim. It was Vorthak Captain Mortel speaking from his position at the tactical display. His 4 eyes were all focused on her with what she was learning to recognize as barely controlled irritation. I am filing an official protest about today's exercise with Vorthak Command. The risk levels exceeded acceptable parameters by 47%. The simulated casualties were lower than any previous exercise. Simulated casualties are not the only measure of tactical success. Proper procedure must be maintained. Nari looked around the bridge. Every alien officer was watching. Her now? Some with open hostility. Others with cold calculation. A few seemed merely curious to see how she would handle the situation. The human crew members looked uncomfortable like children watching their parents argue. She made a decision. Senior staff meeting in Conference Room 1 in 30 minutes. All department heads and species representatives will attend. As the bridge crew dispersed to spread the word, Nari remained at the viewing window. Captain Dongwoo Park moved to stand beside her. This is not going well, is it, Commander? No, Dongwoo, it is not. She watched a formation of Vorthak fighters perform precision maneuvers while a group of human interceptors flew wild spirals around them. They see our tactics as dangerous chaos. We see their methods as slow paralysis. Maybe we need more time. Time is something we do not have. Nari pointed toward the edge of the fleet formation where long-range scout ships patrolled. Intelligence. Reports show devourer activity increasing along the outer rim. Colony ships are going missing. We have maybe 3 weeks before we reach the combat zone. And if the fleet falls apart before then? Nari did not answer because she did not have a good answer. All her life she had led human crews who understood her methods and trusted her judgment. Now she was trying to command beings who thought in completely different ways. Beings who had their own ideas about how wars should be fought. 30 minutes. Later, the conference room was full but divided. The long table had humans sitting on one side and aliens on the other. The symbolism was so obvious it hurt to look at. Nari stood at the head of the table and looked at each face in turn. Some met her gaze, others looked away. A few stared back with open challenge. We have 3 weeks until we reach the outer rim where Devourer scouts have been spotted. I need to know if this fleet can function as one unit or if we are just different species wearing the same uniform. Silence filled the room, not the comfortable quiet of people thinking, but the heavy silence of people who did not trust each other enough to speak honestly. Wing Leader Fendal was the first to break it. Commander, your methods achieve results, but they require us to abandon proven procedures. This creates unacceptable variables. Sub-Commander Kethral nodded agreement. Vorthak fleet doctrine has evolved over 8 centuries of warfare. These methods exist for good reasons. And yet, Nari said quietly, neither of your species stopped the Devourers at Kepler Station. Human recklessness did. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. She could see anger in alien eyes and embarrassment in human ones. This was not going the way she had hoped. Captain Mortel spoke with barely controlled fury. 40,000 deaths is not victory, Commander. It is tragedy. Nari slammed her hand on the table hard enough to make everyone jump. 40,000 deaths saved 3 billion lives. If you cannot understand that difference, then maybe you should not be in this room. She stood up straight and looked around the table one more time. We are going into combat in 3 weeks. The Devourers do not care about your procedures or your protocols or your centuries of tradition. They care about killing everyone in their path. I can work with officers who disagree with my methods. I cannot work with officers who care more about being right than about winning. She turned and walked toward the door, then stopped. Figure out where your priorities lie, all of you. Because when we reach the outer rim, there will not be time for debates about proper procedure. As she left the conference room behind, Nari wondered if she had just made things better or worse. The silence that followed her suggested it might be worse. But there was no time for doubt now. In 3 weeks, they would face the enemy, and she needed this fractured fleet to somehow become whole. 5 days after the tense meeting, the emergency alarm echoed through the Resilience. Commander Nari Kim was in her quarters reviewing personnel files when the urgent tone made her drop everything and run for the bridge. Lieutenant So-Young Lee was already at her station when Nari arrived. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as information poured in from the fleet's sensors. Commander, we are receiving a distress signal. Civilian transport vessel Harmony is under attack approximately 4 hours away near the Garan asteroid field. Nari moved to the main display where a tactical map showed their current position and the location of the distress call. The Harmony was far off their planned route to the outer rim. Captain Dongwoo Park joined her at the display. How? Many people on board the transport? Nari asked. So-Young checked her readings. 12,000 refugees, Commander. Mixed species fleeing from the Devourer advance on the Keto worlds. Sub-Commander Kethral approached from his station. His 4 eyes were focused on the tactical display. Commander, our orders are specific. We must maintain course to the outer rim. Diverting the entire fleet for 1 civilian vessel violates our mission parameters. Wing Leader Fendal appeared beside him with that unnerving Zephyrian speed. The sub-commander is correct. Vorthak High Command and the Zephyrian Council both emphasize the importance of reaching our assigned position on schedule. Nari stared at the display. 4 hours to reach the Harmony. 12,000 innocent people, including children and elderly from multiple species. She thought about the debates and procedures and careful calculations that her alien officers loved so much. How many Devourer ships are attacking the transport? Long-range sensors show 6 Raider-class vessels, So-Young reported. The Harmony has minimal defenses. Nari made her decision in the way that had gotten her in trouble before. Quick and without hesitation. All ships change course for the Garan system. Maximum speed. The bridge went quiet. She could feel the disapproval radiating from the alien officers. Sub-Commander Kethral stepped forward. Commander, I must protest this decision. We are acting without authorization from the Defense Council. Then we will ask for forgiveness, instead of permission. Nari turned to face him. Sub-Commander, how long would it take to get Council approval for this diversion? Standard procedures require a minimum of 6 hours for emergency authorization. In 6 hours, those 12,000 people will be dead. Nari looked around the Tai bridge. Anyone who has a problem with saving innocent lives can file a complaint after we rescue them. The fleet changed course. 200 ships turning as one toward the distant asteroid field. Nari could see the tactical challenges immediately. The Garan field was a maze of rock and metal that would limit their larger ships. The Devourer raiders were fast and maneuverable, perfect for hit-and-run attacks in confined space. She called up the fleet communication system and addressed all ships simultaneously. All vessels, this is Commander Kim. We are responding to a civilian distress call. I know this was not part of our mission, but sometimes the mission changes. 12,000 innocent people are counting on us to do our jobs. Over the next 3 hours as they traveled toward the battle zone, Nari worked with her senior staff to develop a rescue plan. It required precise coordination between all fleet elements, and it meant putting aside the tactical disagreements that had been dividing them. Zephyrian ships will provide long-range cover, she explained to the assembled holographic images of her ship commanders. Your superior sensors and precision weapons make you perfect for picking off raiders at distance. Wing leader, Fendal nodded slowly. Our ships can maintain firing solutions while moving through the asteroid field. Vorthak vessels will create safe corridors with their superior shielding. Your ships can take more punishment than anyone else, so you will form protective walls around the civilian transport. Sub-Commander Kethrol looked thoughtful. Our shield, harmonics can be synchronized to create overlapping defensive barriers. Human ships will perform close combat operations. We will drive the raiders away from the transport and keep them busy while the evacuation takes place. Captain Mortel spoke from his ship's bridge. Commander, this plan requires split-second timing between all 3 fleet elements. Yes, it does. Nari met his gaze through the holographic display. Do you think we can manage it? There was a pause. Then Mortel answered. We will make it work, Commander. When they arrived at the Garan system, the situation was worse than the initial reports had suggested. The Harmony was drifting powerless with atmosphere leaking from multiple hull breaches. 6 Devourer raiders circled it like predators playing with wounded prey. The rescue operation began immediately. Zephyrian ships spread out along the outer edge of the asteroid field, their weapons locking onto the raiders with mathematical precision. Vorthak vessels moved into formation around the damaged transport, their shields creating a protective barrier. Human fighters dove into the chaos of the asteroid field, engaging the raiders in close combat. Nari watched from the bridge as her plan unfolded. For the first few minutes, everything went perfectly. The Zephyrian long-range fire forced 2 raiders to retreat. The Vorthak shields held against concentrated enemy bombardment. Human fighters harried the remaining raiders, keeping them away from the civilian ship. Then things started going wrong. Lieutenant Jae-min Yoon's fighter squadron was pursuing a raider through the asteroid field when they detected a faint distress beacon. A small escape pod with failing life support was drifting between 2 massive rocks. The pod's transponder identified its occupants as Vorthak civilians, including several children. Commander, this is Blue Squadron. Yoon's voice came through the comm with static from the asteroid interference. We have civilian pod in distress. Engines are dead, and life support is failing. The tactical situation was clear. Yoon's squadron was needed to keep pressure on the raiders. But the escape pod would not survive long enough for a dedicated rescue ship to reach it. Nari made another quick decision. Blue Squadron, break off pursuit and assist that escape pod. She watched on the tactical display as the human fighters changed course. It was a risk that left a gap in their attack formation, but some risks were worth taking. The rescue was dangerous work. The escape pod was wedged between asteroids in a position that larger ships could not reach. Lieutenant Yoon had to pilot his fighter through a gap barely wider than his ship's wingspan, while his squadmate, Mi-young-han, performed a hazardous spacewalk to attach rescue cables. On the main tactical display, Nari could see that the raiders were taking advantage of the gap in the human attack formation. One Devourer ship broke through and headed directly for the transport. The Vorthak shields held, but the enemy fire was intense. Then Wing Leader Fendal's ship moved into an impossible firing position. Threading between asteroids with Zephyrian grace, her vessel delivered precision strikes that disabled the attacking raider without hitting any of the human fighters in the area. "Nice shooting, Wing Leader," Captain Dongwoo Park commented from his position. "Human tactics require adaptation," Fendal replied, but Nari could hear something like approval in her crystalline voice. The battle continued for another hour. When it was over, all 6 raider ships had been destroyed or driven off. The Harmony was secured and its 12,000 refugees were safe. But the victory had come at a cost. Several ships had taken damage and there had been casualties. As the fleet regrouped, Nari received a personal communication from the Harmony's captain. He was an elderly Vorthak named Tim Resch, with scars that spoke of a lifetime spent in dangerous spaces. "Commander Kim, I want to thank you and your fleet for our rescue. When I saw human ships diving into that asteroid field to save Vorthak children, I understood something important." "What was that, Captain?" "Your species may be young, Commander, but your hearts are vast. Today you showed us what it means to put lives before protocols." After the communication ended, Nari stood on the bridge looking out at her fleet. The ships were still divided by species, but something had changed. She could see it in the way the formations flew closer together. She could hear it in the radio chatter between vessels that had fought side by side. Sub-Commander Keith Rowell approached her station. His 4 eyes focused on her with an expression she had not seen before. "Commander, the Vorthak fleet performed well in coordination with human and Zephyrian units." "Yes, they did, Sub-Commander. Perhaps there is value in tactical flexibility that I had not previously considered." It was not exactly an apology, but from a Vorthak it was close enough. Nari nodded acknowledgement. Wing Leader Fendal joined them at the display. "Commander Kim, your rescue plan required precise coordination between very different tactical approaches. The results were satisfactory." From a Zephyrian, satisfactory was high praise. "Thank you, Wing Leader. I could not have done it without the skill of your crews." As the senior officers dispersed, Nari allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. They had worked together when it mattered. Different species with different methods, but united by a common purpose. Captain Dongwoo Park remained beside her as the bridge crew settled back into routine operations. "Think this changes anything, Commander?" Nari watched a formation of mixed human and alien fighters returning from patrol, flying together instead of in separate groups. 3 days after the rescue at Garan, Nari Kim sat alone in her quarters staring at a data pad. The screen showed casualty reports from Kepler Station. She had read them countless times, but still returned to them when sleep would not come. Lieutenant Colonel Jun-seok Kim, no relation despite the shared name, he had volunteered to stay behind with the mining charges. Major So-jin Park had led a squadron of fighters in the final holding action. Sergeant Minho Lee had been barely 20 years old when he died, buying time for the evacuation ships. 40,000 names. 40,000 people who had trusted her command and never went home. The door chimed and Dr. Eunmi Young entered without waiting for permission. She was the fleet's chief medical officer and one of the few people who could get away with ignoring Nari's privacy. They had served together for 8 years and Jung could read her moods better than anyone. "You are carrying ghosts again," Jung said as she sat in the chair across from Nari's desk. 40,000 ghosts. Nari set down the datapad but kept her eyes on it. "Some days I wonder if the council was right to question my appointment. Maybe an alien commander would have found another way at Kepler Station." Jung leaned forward. "And maybe 3 billion civilians would be dead instead of safe in their homes. You made the call that mattered." "Did I, though?" Nari finally looked up. "Or did I just choose the option that felt most heroic? 40,000 volunteers dying gloriously while billions of strangers live. Nari, you know that is not how it happened." Before Jung could say more, the emergency alarm sounded throughout the ship. Both women were on their feet immediately, heading for the door. Nari's personal problems would have to wait. The bridge was busy when they arrived. Lieutenant So-young Lee was coordinating with multiple ships while Captain Dongwoo Park studied the long-range sensor display. His expression was grim. "Commander, we have a problem." Park pointed to the tactical screen. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive devourer fleet moving toward the Nerion system. Nari moved to the display. The enemy formation was huge. Hundreds of ships in a coordinated advance. She had never seen anything like it. How many ships are we looking at, Captain? Initial count shows over 600 vessels, including multiple Dreadnought-class battleships. Commander, this is 3 times larger than our fleet. The bridge fell silent. Nari could feel the eyes of her crew on her as she studied the tactical information. Narion was a heavily populated system with colonies on 7 different worlds. Over 5 billion people lived there. Sub-Commander Kethral approached from his station. Commander, I have run probability calculations for direct engagement with this force. Our chances of victory are 12.7%. Wing Leader. Fendal appeared with typical Zephyrian speed. Preservation of our forces should take priority. We can withdraw and regroup with reinforcements. Nari continued staring at the display. 600 enemy ships versus her 200. The math was simple and brutal. In a straight fight, her fleet would be destroyed. How long before reinforcements could reach Narion? She asked. Kethral consulted his calculations. Minimum 6 weeks, Commander. More likely 8 weeks given current Council authorization procedures. And how long will Narion last against that Devourer fleet? Without defensive support, the system will fall within hours of the enemy arrival. Nari closed her eyes. 5 billion people. Men, women, and children of dozens of species, all counting on the Defense Council fleets to protect them. But the nearest fleet was 8 weeks away, and her own force was outnumbered 3-1. She opened her eyes and looked around the bridge. Her human officers watched her with expressions of grim determination. They knew what she was thinking. The alien officers looked more cautious, but she could see they understood the stakes as well. When will the Devourer fleet reach Narion? 4 days, Commander. So Young reported. 4 days to decide the fate of 5 billion people. Nari felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Every choice she made would determine who lived and who died. Just like at Kepler Station, she called a meeting of all senior commanders. Within an hour, the conference room was full of holographic images as captains and wing leaders joined the discussion from across the fleet. The mood was somber as Nari explained the situation. The Devourer fleet outnumbers us 3-1. They have superior firepower and more experienced crews. In a conventional battle, we will lose. Captain Mortel spoke from his ship's bridge. Commander, are we seriously considering engaging such a force? The casualties would be enormous. The casualties from abandoning 5 billion people to the Devourers would be worse, Nari replied. Vorthak Captain Welthon joined the discussion. But if we engage and lose our fleet, then we cannot help anyone else. Strategic withdrawal preserves our ability to fight another day. Another day may be too late for the people of Narion. Wing Leader Fendal's crystalline features reflected the bridge lights as she spoke. Commander, what you are suggesting approaches madness. No tactical doctrine supports engaging an enemy with such overwhelming superiority. Nari looked around the conference room at all the faces, both physical and holographic. She could see doubt creeping into their eyes, the same doubt that had filled the council chamber weeks ago. They were wondering if the human commander was about to make another impossible decision that would cost thousands of lives. You are right, Wing Leader. No doctrine supports what I am thinking. But sometimes doctrine is not enough. She stood and moved to the tactical display showing the Narion system. The system has an extensive asteroid belt and a gas giant with strong gravitational fields. If we use the terrain correctly, we can force the Devourers to fight on our terms instead of theirs. Sub-Commander Kethral studied the display. Commander, even with tactical advantages, the numerical disparity is too great. We might inflict casualties, but we cannot achieve victory. Maybe victory is not the goal. Nari turned to face the assembled officers. Maybe the goal is buying time. Maybe the goal is making the Devourers pay such a high price that they think twice about attacking other systems. The room was quiet as everyone considered her words. She could see the calculations running behind alien eyes, the careful weighing of costs and benefits that her non-human officers excelled at. Finally, Chief Engineer Hunwoo Choi spoke from the Resilience's engine room. Commander, what kind of plan are we talking about? Nari smiled for the first time. In days. The kind that requires every ship in this fleet to perform beyond its design specifications. The kind that needs perfect timing and absolute trust between all crew members. She began outlining her idea. It was audacious and dangerous and required split-second coordination between hundreds of ships. The plan involved using the Nerion system's gravitational fields to accelerate smaller ships to unprecedented speeds, while larger vessels provided covering fire from concealed positions. The timing must be perfect, she explained. Any ship that falls behind or breaks formation will be destroyed. I will not lie to you, this plan has a high casualty probability. When she finished, there was silence in the conference room. She could see her officers processing the tactical requirements and calculating the risks. Some looked skeptical. Others appeared thoughtful. A few seemed almost excited by the challenge. Captain Dongwoo Park was the first to speak. Commander the Human, ships volunteer for the high-risk assault positions. Nari shook her head. This is not about humans volunteering to die for aliens or aliens staying safe while humans take risks. This is about all of us choosing to protect innocent lives. Sub-Commander Kethrel stood slowly. The Vorthak fleet will take position as planned, Commander. Our shields will hold. Wing Leader Fendal nodded. Zephyrian precision targeting will not fail you. One by one, the other commanders voiced their agreement. Not because they thought the plan would work, but because they understood that some fights were worth having regardless of the odds. As the meeting ended, Vorthak Captain Mortel approached Nari privately. His four eyes focused on her with an expression she had never seen before. Commander, after Kepler Station, many questioned whether humans understood the true cost of command. I see now that perhaps humans understand it too well. That night, Nari sat alone in her quarters preparing her final log entry. Outside her window, the fleet was moving into position for the journey to Nerion. 200 ships carrying crews from a dozen worlds, all united by a common purpose. She began recording. Personal log commander, Nari Kim. In 18 hours we will engage a devourer fleet 3 times our size. The odds of survival are low, but the alternative is abandoning 5 billion innocent people to certain death. She paused, looking out at the stars. If we do not survive this, let the record show that 40,001 souls prove that belonging is not about where you come from. It is about what you are willing to sacrifice for others. She ended the recording and prepared for what might be her final battle as fleet commander. Tomorrow would test everything she believed about duty and sacrifice and the price of protecting those who could not protect themselves. The ghosts of Kepler Station would be watching. The Nerion system spread out before them like a 3-dimensional puzzle of planets, moons, and asteroid fields. Commander Nari Kim stood on the bridge of the Resilience, studying the tactical display that would either save 5 billion lives or become the graveyard of her fleet. All ships report ready, Commander. Lieutenant So-Young Lee announced from her station. Nari nodded and activated the fleet-wide communication system. 200 ships from dozens of worlds waited for her words. She could see them on the display spread out in the complex formation that her plan required. All vessels, this is Commander Kim. In 6 hours, the Devourer fleet will arrive in this system. We are outnumbered 3-1. Our ships are smaller and our weapons are lighter. By every measure of military science, we should retreat. She paused, letting those words sink in before continuing. But 5 billion people live in this system. Farmers and teachers and children who have done nothing wrong except live in the path of an enemy that knows no mercy. Today we stand between them and extinction. On the bridge around her, she could see the faces of her crew, human and alien, working side by side at stations they had once refused to share. The distrust and division that had plagued the fleet seemed like ancient history now. The plan is complex and dangerous. Every ship must perform exactly as briefed. There is no room for error and no time for hesitation. But if we succeed, we will save more lives than any fleet in galactic history. She looked out at the asteroid field where the first phase of the battle would take place. Massive rocks tumbling through space in patterns that had remained unchanged for millions of years. Today those rocks would become weapons. Remember why we are here. Remember what we are fighting for. All ships, take your positions. The fleet moved with precision that would have been impossible weeks earlier. Vorthak vessels used their superior shielding to establish defensive positions among the asteroids. Zephyrian ships took up long-range, firing positions where their accurate weapons could pick off enemy ships. Human vessels prepared for the high-speed assault runs that would be the heart of Nari's plan. Sub-Commander Keithral approached from the tactical station. "Commander, all Vorthak ships report ready. Shield harmonics are synchronized for maximum defensive coverage." Wing Leader Fendal appeared with her usual speed. "Zephyrian vessels have established firing solutions on all predicted enemy approach vectors. We will not miss." Captain Dongwoo Park joined them at the main display. "Human assault squadrons are ready for the gravitational slingshot maneuver. Chief Engineer Choi says the engines will hold together for the acceleration we need." Nari studied the complex web of trajectories and timing that her plan required. Ships would use the gas giant's gravity to achieve speeds that their engines could never manage alone. But the timing had to be perfect. Too early and they would miss their targets. Too late and they would fly into concentrated enemy fire. "Estimated time until Devourer arrival?" she asked. 5 hours and 37 minutes, Commander." So Young replied. Long-range sensors began detecting the approaching enemy fleet. 600 ships in perfect formation advancing like a dark tide across space. Nari had seen Devourer fleets before but never one this large. It was like watching a force of nature approaching. "My God," Captain Park whispered. "There are so many of them." Nari activated her personal communicator and contacted Dr. Yoon Mi-jung in the medical bay. "Jung, are your teams ready?" "Medical facilities across the fleet are prepared for massive casualties, Commander. We have converted cargo bays into emergency treatment centers." The reality of what they were about to attempt settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. This was not a simulation or training exercise. In a few hours, people would be dying in large numbers, and many of them would be friends. As the Devourer fleet drew closer, Nari refined the final details of her battle plan. The enemy formation was exactly what her intelligence reports had predicted. A massive wall of ships advancing in overwhelming force. They were not expecting serious resistance from such a small defending fleet. That would be their first mistake. "Commander, Devourer fleet has entered the outer system." "So," Young announced. "They are maintaining standard battle formation." Nari watched the enemy ships on her display. Hundreds of dark hulls bristling with weapons designed for one purpose. The Devourers did not capture or negotiate or show mercy. They consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. "All ships, this is Commander Kim. Execute battle plan Kepler." She had named the plan after the station where 40,000 had died. It seemed appropriate somehow. The battle began with the Zephyrian ships opening fire from their concealed positions. Precise energy beams reached across impossible distances to strike the lead Devourer vessels. The enemy ships staggered under the unexpected assault, but their shields held. The Devourer response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of ships turned toward the Zephyrian positions, unleashing concentrated firepower that lit up space like an artificial sun. But Wing Leader Fendal's crews had chosen their positions well. Hidden among asteroids and debris fields, they continued firing while avoiding the worst of the return bombardment. Phase 2 began when the Devourer fleet moved deeper into the system, pursuing what they thought were the main defending forces. That brought them into range of the Vorthak defensive positions. Sub-Commander Kethral's ships had created an invisible maze of overlapping shield barriers throughout the asteroid field. As Devourer vessels tried to advance, they found their path, blocked by walls of energy that appeared from nowhere. Ships that tried to force their way through faced concentrated fire from multiple directions. "Vorthak defensive grid is holding," Kethral reported. "Enemy advance has been slowed by 43%, but the Devourers were learning. Their commanders began coordinating attacks to overwhelm individual shield positions. The defensive grid started to crack under sustained assault. Commander, we are taking heavy casualties." Captain Mortel's voice came through the comm with background noise of explosions and emergency alarms. "Request permission to fall back to secondary positions." "Negative," Nari replied. "Hold your positions for 90 more seconds." Those 90 seconds felt like 90 hours. Nari watched on the tactical display as Vorthak ships took punishment that would have destroyed lesser vessels. Their superior engineering kept them fighting even with massive hull damage and failing systems. Then Phase 3 began. All human. Ships execute slingshot maneuver now. The human assault squadrons that had been waiting in the shadow of the gas giant suddenly accelerated to incredible speeds. Using gravitational forces that had been building for hours, they shot toward the Devourer fleet like missiles fired from the hand of a god. Nari watched the tactical display as dozens of small, fast ships carved through the enemy formation. They moved too quickly for the Devourer weapons to track effectively. Human pilots pushed their ships beyond safe limits, threading between enemy vessels and striking at weak points with surgical precision. Lieutenant Jaemin Yoon's squadron hit the enemy flagship with a coordinated attack that knocked out its main weapons array. Captain So-hyun Lee's destroyer rammed a Devourer cruiser that was about to destroy a damaged Vorthak vessel. The sacrifice saved 200 alien lives but cost her ship and crew. "We are breaking their formation," Captain Park reported with excitement in his voice. "The enemy lines are collapsing." But the Devourers adapted quickly. Their remaining ships began concentrating fire on the human assault vessels. The small fast ships that had been untouchable moments before became targets in a deadly shooting gallery. Nari watched helplessly as ship after ship winked out on her display. Each lost signal represented dozens of crew members who would never go home. The price of victory was being paid in blood and metal. "Commander, we have lost contact with Blue Squadron." So, Young reported. "Red Squadron is down to 3 ships. Green Squadron has taken heavy damage." The battle was turning into exactly what Nari had feared, a grinding war of attrition that her smaller fleet could not win. But the plan was not finished yet. All ships execute final phase, Convergence Pattern 7. Every remaining vessel in her fleet turned toward the Devourer command ship at the center of the enemy formation. It was the largest and most heavily armed vessel Nari had ever seen. A kilometer of dark metal and weapons that could destroy planets. The convergence required perfect timing. All 3 fleet elements had to arrive at the target simultaneously from different vectors. Zephyrian ships provided covering fire. Vorthak vessels used their shields to clear a path. Human ships delivered the final strike. "Commander, we are taking heavy fire." Chief Engineer Hyunwoo Choi's voice came through the comm with static and the sound of alarms. "Hull breaches on deck 7 through 12. Shields are down to 15%. "Hold together a little longer, old girl," Nari whispered to her ship. The Resilience shuddered under enemy bombardment but continued forward. Around them, other ships were doing the same. Damaged vessels with failing systems and wounded crews all pushing toward one target. The combined fleet strike hit the Devourer command ship from 6 different directions simultaneously. Hundreds of weapons firing in perfect coordination. The massive enemy vessel staggered under the assault. Its shields flared and failed. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull. 3 days after the Battle of Narion, Commander Nari Kim stood in the same circular chamber where her journey had begun. The Galactic Defense Council looked exactly as it had before, with floating lights and alien beings in their strange robes. But everything else had changed. Behind her stood Sub-Commander Keith Rahl, Wing Leader Fendal, and Captain Dongwoo Park. They were not required to be there, but they had insisted on coming. Other senior officers from her fleet filled the observer section, human and alien standing together in a show of unity that would have been impossible weeks earlier. Ambassador Thel Nome rose from his seat with the same grinding voice she remembered. His 4 eyes focused on her with what might have been disappointment. "Commander Kim, we gathered today to review your recent actions at the Narion system. While the tactical outcome was successful, questions remain about your command decisions." Nari kept her expression neutral, but she could feel anger building in her chest. Here it was again. The same doubts and second-guessing that had plagued her since Kepler Station. The casualty rates under human leadership continue to concern this council. Thelnome continued. 28 ships lost, over 15,000 dead. These numbers suggest a pattern of reckless decision-making that puts our forces at unnecessary risk. Murmurs filled the chamber. Nari could hear the whispers in alien languages discussing her fitness for command. Some voices sounded supportive, but others carried the familiar tone of disapproval. High Curator Velsarn of the Zephyrians spoke next. Her crystalline voice carried across the chamber like music made of ice. Commander Kim, your victory at Nerion cannot be disputed. However, the methods employed resulted in casualties that a more experienced commander might have avoided. Nari had heard enough. She had stood in this chamber before and listened to these same arguments. She had accepted their doubt and tried to prove herself through actions. But now she understood that some people would never be satisfied. Perhaps it would be prudent to consider reassignment, Thelnome said with barely concealed satisfaction. A senior commander from one of the more established species could provide the steady leadership that our integrated fleets require. The chamber fell quiet. This was the moment Nari had been expecting since she first took command. The moment when politics and prejudice would override results and sacrifice. She looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching her. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed eager to see her removed from command. A few appeared genuinely conflicted about the decision. Then she turned to face Ambassador Thelnome directly. Stop. Her voice cut through the chamber like a weapon. Every conversation ceased. Every eye turned to focus on her. You want to question my right to command. You want to suggest that humans do not belong in leadership roles. Her voice carried to every corner of the massive room. You want to tell that to the 40,000 who did not make it home from Kepler Station. The chamber became absolutely silent. Nari could hear the soft hum of the air systems and the distant sound of ships moving outside the station. She stepped forward, moving closer to the curved table where the council members sat. Those 40,000 died so that 3 billion others could live. The 15,000 we lost at Nerion died so that 5 billion more could see another sunrise. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Every name on those casualty lists represents someone who believed that protecting innocent lives was worth the ultimate sacrifice. They did not die because of human recklessness. They died because someone had to make the hard choices that you refused to make. She gestured toward the officers standing behind her. Sub-Commander Kethral lost half his crew at Nerion. His ship barely made it home. Wing Leader Fendal's vessel took damage that should have destroyed it. But they do not question whether they belong here. They know they do because they stood together when it mattered. Ambassador Thelnome started to speak, but Nari cut him off. You can question my species. You can question my methods. You can question my decisions. But before you do, remember this. Belonging is not earned through politics or bloodlines or centuries of tradition. She looked around the chamber meeting as many eyes as she could. Belonging is earned through service, through sacrifice, through the willingness to stand up when others cannot, through choosing to protect the innocent even when the cost is terrible. The silence in the chamber was complete now. Even the background hum of the station systems seemed muted. The 40,000 who did not make it home from Kepler Station. They belonged to something bigger than any one species. They belonged to the idea that every innocent life is worth protecting. Every farmer on a distant world. Every child playing in alien parks. Every elderly couple watching sunsets on planets they will never visit. Nari's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it still carried to every corner of the chamber. If you want to tell them they were wrong, Ambassador, you are welcome to visit their graves and make your case. She turned and began walking toward the chamber exit. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space. But I will not stand here and listen to you dishonor their sacrifice with your comfortable doubts and political calculations. They died for something greater than your approval, and they deserve better than your second guessing. As she reached the chamber doors, every officer who had served under her command rose from their seats. Human and alien together they followed her out of the chamber in perfect formation. The council members sat in stunned silence as the chamber emptied. Only when the last officer had left did the quiet conversations begin. Outside the council chamber, Wing Leader Fendal approached Nari. Her crystalline features reflected the corridor lights as she spoke. Commander, the Zephyrian fleet stands, ready for your next mission. Sub-Commander Kethral nodded, his four eyes focusing on her with respect she had never seen before. As does the Vorthak contingent. Where you lead, we follow. Captain Dongwu Park smiled. The human fleet never had any doubts, Commander. Nari looked at the integrated group of officers surrounding her. Species that had once refused to work together now united by shared purpose and mutual respect. The divisions that had seemed so important weeks ago had been burned away in the fires of battle. Then let us go home, she said quietly. All of us. As they boarded the transport back to the fleet, Chief Engineer Hyunwoo Choi asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Commander, what do you think the Council will decide? Nari smiled for the first time since the battle. It does not matter what they decide, Chief. We have already proven what we needed to prove. The transport carried them back to the orbital shipyard where the fleet was undergoing repairs. Nari could see the resilience in the distance. Her ship looked like it had been through a war which it had. Hull plates were missing. Weapons arrays were being rebuilt. The bridge windows had been replaced after taking a direct hit. But she was still flying, still carrying her crew home. 3 weeks later, Nari stood on the bridge of a new flagship. The Remembrance was larger and more advanced than the Resilience, but it felt the same. Home for a crew that had learned to work together regardless of what species they came from. On her desk sat a memorial list, not just of human casualties, but of every being who had died under her command. 40,000 from Kepler Station, 15,000 from Nerion. Names from dozens of worlds and species, all united by their willingness to serve something greater than themselves. Lieutenant So Young Lee approached from the communications station. Commander, we are receiving new orders from Defense Command. Nari looked up from her memorial list. What kind of orders, Lieutenant? Patrol assignment to the Outer Rim. High priority. Devourer activity has increased in the Kepler sector. Nari nodded. It seemed appropriate somehow, going back to where it all started. Signal the fleet. All ships prepare for departure. As the Remembrance and her escorts moved away from the shipyard, Nari looked back at the Defense Council station. She had proven herself in the only way that mattered, not through politics or diplomatic speeches, but through the willingness to make impossible choices and live with the consequences. Sati. Council had eventually confirmed her command, though the vote had been close. It did not matter. What mattered was the fleet that followed her. 200 ships crewed by beings from across the galaxy, all united by a simple understanding. They belonged not because they were accepted, but because they chose to serve something greater than themselves. And they had inspired others to do the same. The 40,000 who had died at Kepler Station would have approved.